Hey everybody, Max Aita here. Okay, this is going to be our Q&A for this week. Let's get to it. I'm going to hop into the Discord here and check out what you guys have put up. A lot of good questions actually this week. I was impressed because we haven't done these for a while, but here we are. So, first question up from one Ricky. It is the ending of my comp phase got messed up because I got the flu during the deload week. Took 6 days off. My lifts feel good, but my front and back squat feel terrible now. Messing up the last 2 weeks of the program. Will you do a short strength phase and into a comp cycle, or just reset and do a longer program? Thanks. So I'm not sure exactly how much of the comp phase got messed up. If it was like, hey, my last week of the comp phase got messed up, then that's one thing. But if it's like the last, you know, 6 weeks got messed up, that's different. So I'd say let's say the last 2 weeks of your training into the competition, they get screwed up somehow. I would I would just kind of keep doing what you're doing, try to salvage it as much as you can with some heavy lifts so you get some exposure to what it's going to be like in the meet. If it's like 5, 6 weeks out, I wouldn't do much. I would just try to regroup and build up into the competition. A week or two off from training is not going to be the end of the world. So I would just kind of take it in stride and go from there. If your squats feel bad but your lifts feel good, that's not a problem because we compete in the sport of weightlifting in snatch, clean, and jerk. Those are more important than your squats. But if you really feel the need to have some strong feeling squats going into the competition, just throw some heavier singles in before your main volume work on those squat days, and you'll be fine. For the most part, that's what I would do. That's probably the best answer I can give with the information you've got. The last 2 weeks of your program being messed up, there's not a lot you can do. Just try to touch some heavier weights before you get to the meet, and that's about it. I wouldn't reset anything though. Okay, next question, Chris Murphy. So Chris says, hey Max, what are some of the trends you have noticed in these big international training halls with exercise selections, frequency of lifts, and intensity as different countries' athletes prepare for their competition day? Anything stand out? So what I would say here is, one, at competitions, everybody's basically doing the same thing. You're tapering into the competition. You're kind of running into the meet in a sense that you're like, all right, I've got, snatches, clean and jerks, maybe some power variations, maybe some hang variations here and there. You're going to take your last heaviest lifts, but mostly it's the same kind of stuff from basically all the teams, which is, it's good and bad. It's cool because it's like, yeah, you get to see people train, but it's also like gets kind of boring because like they're all doing basically the exact same stuff. I would say trend wise, the things I've noticed that have been consistent are China definitely does a lot of heavy pulling usually before competitions, and their last bits of training are usually the most strange, as in they'll do like heavy lifts, maybe just snatching one day, maybe just clean and jerk one day, and then like really heavy pulls pretty close to the competition. Most every other team is doing something pretty traditional. A few snatch and clean and jerk workouts, going in the last heavy day. You can kind of pick out like this is the day they're going to go to their openers, or maybe above that, maybe max out session, and then kind of the rest of the sessions are all pretty medium intensity, low intensity, and maybe some heavy squatting. I will say there's not a lot of heavy squatting, like really, really heavy weights going up. A couple of athletes definitely squat pretty hard, but most of them are not doing these really big, hard, high weight squats. Although anyone who watched the Worlds would know that the Iraqi super, the junior, he did some really heavy. I think he squatted like 315, which was big, and it was a tough squat. And he snatched a PR in the training hall and then opened with it at the competition. So, you've got that kind of stuff. But I'd say for the most part, the trends are hard to spot. There's not much going on there because it's all just basically the same stuff you see every time. Yeah, that's probably unfortunately the answer. Chris asks again, another question. When should squats/pulls be heavy and slow? When should they be fast and light? So we always want to try to apply the most force we possibly can. So I can tell you when pulls and squats should not be slow, and that's at the end of your set, meaning we don't want the last several reps of those sets to be slow because of fatigue. It's okay if a weight moves slowly because it's heavy, but not because you're tired. And that's because we don't want to be doing a lot of volume that isn't producing lots of force, especially for strength work. So the main thing here is if your squats or pulls are getting slow because you're getting fatigued during the set, or doing multiple sets to the point where you're really moving slower and grinding things out, not good. It's fine if they're moving slow when they're heavy, because you're still applying a lot of force because the weight is heavy, but you're not necessarily in a spot where you're moving slowly as a byproduct of fatigue. As far as fast and light, hopefully most of them are fast. Light pulls, in my opinion, and light squats. Well, light pulls are useful for developing technical skills in things that you struggle with. So if you're not really getting a position, you're having a hard time using your upper body in the exercise, or you really need to work on a little bit of a speed element to the positions of the lift, or something along those lines. So lighter in the sense you need to develop something you're not really good at. That's when it makes sense. Light squats really only make sense if are, I mean, I guess if you're maybe trying to use them as a way of like work capacity or conditioning, or maybe in the sense that like you really want to develop some technical skill in the squat you're lacking, but those are kind of rare. And ultimately, squatting is pretty straightforward, and you're going to do it across a spectrum for hypertrophy, higher rep, high RPE sets closer to failure. For strength, higher load, lower RPE sets for strength development, and then really heavy or singles as a way for skill development and max strength. But outside of that, like really light squats, they'd have a place as far as being added in for deload sessions or lighter workout days, but really you're not going to get a ton out of it unless you're doing one of those three things. That's what I would say to that. Magris asks how to manage the program, so probably the weightlifting AI program, with lumbar pain. He also asks, and in general with injury, and then he asks news about the future of weightlifting AI. So I'll address all three of these. First, how to manage the program with lumbar pain. Try to avoid anything that bothers it. So the first thing is if it hurts on pulls or squats, try to take those out. Snatches, clean and jerk, same thing. Remove those and find a suitable replacement. So squatting, maybe it's belt squats, right? Maybe it's leg press or hack squat. For snatch and clean and jerk, if your back is injured, you might be stuck being, out of luck. You just can't do them. If you can, do them lighter, right? Make the movement harder. So do like no hook, no feet, because you can train relatively more difficult, like increase the level of difficulty, but not the load. Power variations, hang variations, or hang powers, block lifts, anything that you can find that doesn't irritate your back, that's your go-to. If you have to regress beyond that, then you might just do snatch push press or something that allows you to at least maintain some degree of conditioning for the lifts. But outside of that, like lumbar stuff, low back stuff is always a big pain because you really can't do a lot with it. You're going to be limited to things like belt squats, hack squats, single leg squats, more bodybuilding type stuff. So you kind of have to just piece together what you can with it. If it's like a on again, off again thing where your back flares up at certain points, then try to just lower the training intensity a little bit or the volume, whichever you need to allow you to do whatever you can. But it's really like hard to know if you don't know what's wrong with your back, and it's hard to make decisions just based off of, I've got low back pain. In general, with injury, same thing. I mean, injury, the first thing is stop doing the thing that hurts it. So try not to make it worse. The second is find things you can replace those things you had to cut out with things that don't bother it. So, if your wrist is hurt, no more snatch, no more jerk, no more clean, but you could do pulls, you could do more squats, you could do rows, whatever it is. So stop the thing that hurts it, add something in place that doesn't bother it, that's still productive, and then just continue to do that over time as the injury gets better. Test out things you can to make it, hey, pulls are okay, and maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, pulls are good, but you can throw in some powers now or muscle snatches or whatever it is. Find things to constantly replace the stuff you don't want to be doing with stuff you do want to do. Yeah, that's probably a good answer for that. News about the future of weightlifting AI. So a lot of big changes. I know we've talked many times about the update, the big push. We are still working on it. We've had some major slowdowns the last year that kind of stopped us from really getting things out where we wanted to, but we are pushing a bunch of new stuff this year. It'll all be out in Q1. So the next couple months, we're going to release the new app, all these other things. Everything, feature wise is going to be dependent on how far along we are with it and what we think its value is going to be to people. So things like computer vision, etc., those are going to be things we add in as we feel they're to the level they need to be reliable, or to be usable. That doesn't mean that that's a long term or a long time away. It's just a matter of, we don't want to push stuff out that is kind of like not necessarily worth using in the short term. But yeah, I mean, again, we had some big setbacks, some stuff that slowed us down last year. But now we're cooking. We're excited about what we're pushing out. So it will be cool. It'll be exciting. The level of detail we've gone into and the way we've designed the new system is so much better. I'm really excited to see it actually come out. And with it being on the Coach Logic sort of code base, it's going to be awesome. Like there's so much great usability, features, functionality that it'll feel like, a 10x, 20x improvement over the original app, if not more. You'll just be able to control every detail of the program. And really like the stuff that I feel like 1.0 that you guys use now that, could be better or give you more control or flexibility over will be addressed. And so, visibility into the program, for example, will be way better. You can see the whole picture, all the training loads and all this stuff basically week by week. You'll be able to look at every day in a much more detailed way and actually make adjustments at a finer level. So I'm excited for it. It's just, it's like a lot of stuff. It just takes time. And when your team goes, and works their ass off and you put something together, but it still takes time to build it. That's always, it's always frustrating, but, we're just going to keep going. We haven't stopped. We haven't lost sight of it. It's just, we've hit a little bit of a little roadblock there. Zone Doc. I love that name, given name from birth. So Zone Doc. Recently, I've been working on widening my squats. I assume his feet. I have long femurs, about 35% of my body length, and the wider squats are keeping my torso more vertical. However, I'm having trouble moving my feet out to this wider stance in my snatches and clean catches. Any drills that I should be doing, or is this something that will just come naturally the longer I squat wider? Thank you for your help. So, two things. One, your squat stance and the stance you lift in my opinion, don't need to be the same. You don't need to replicate them perfectly. I've seen so many good lifters that squat and lift with different stances. It's not going to make or break anything. The thing I would say is if your squat mechanics with a wider stance are better and that's conducive to the clean recovery or the snatch, then you want to try to move towards that. But again, if you can't move your feet intuitively or naturally into that position, then maybe that stance isn't going to work for you, because under pressure with a maximum weight, if you have to consciously think about doing something with your feet, it's going to be much harder to make the lift. So I would say, one, give it time, practice with just doing the lift, letting your feet pop wider if they can. if after some time that doesn't happen naturally and they don't ever move out wider, then, maybe that's not going to happen. And I wouldn't chase it down because your squats feel better that way, and force your lifts to happen that way. Again, though, if it's the kind of thing where it really improves the mechanics, you can do everything in your power to sort of finagle that to happen, push for it. There's a bunch of little drills you can practice with. I mean, just drawing boxes on the ground and popping your feet wider to land like that. Put plates next to your feet so you have to pick your feet up to step up onto the plate and force them out wider. There's a bunch of different drills and stuff you can do. So I would say just be creative, try different things, think about what you would have somebody do if you were teaching them to do it. How would I get somebody else to pop their feet wider? And I'll try that same drill. So that's what I would suggest there. One, don't worry about it too much, but if you do want to force it or try it, then, just think of some drills and just practice and try different things. Try 3 or 4 things and see if you get any luck with it. Lawrence Frago asks, what have you learned, anything in particularly insightful from seeing so many other countries training at Worlds, Pan Ams, etc., and how did that influence the AI training program? So the things I've seen at Worlds and in the training halls, like I said before, a lot of it's the same stuff. It's kind of the basic last week or 10 days before a comp. You see mostly the same things, heavy snatches and clean and jerks, and maybe some variety there, just depending on the different team. What I would say I've seen from so many different athletes, and the commonalities between them is, one, the best teams are the ones that are like probably the most, as a whole, not necessarily one athlete, but are the most like methodical as far as they have a pretty structured system of training. You see a lot of them doing the same kind of things, but it's mostly the basic stuff. So it's snatches, clean and jerks, squats, pulls, pressing, push pressing of some type. And they're doing these things with relatively, I would say, large volumes, but they're doing a lot of training. The key, though, is they're not destroying themselves. You don't see them getting just wrecked in training where they're just beating themselves to pieces, doing heavy lifts over and over and over again. They're touching heavy weights on a regular basis, probably once a week or every couple weeks, but there's a lot of volume that's going into technical work and just general building of strength and motor qualities. So that's the commonality, is that most teams are training in a way that is like the AI. It's like a lot of, moderate volume, moderate intensity work that really lets you build on technical skills, some variety, or in some cases, a lot of variety depending on the phase, and then, heavier lifts during competition phases. Pretty much the same system that gets used around the world, to some degree, one variation over another. Tony D asks, what is your experience prescribing squat variations for lifters outside of back and front squat, i.e. box squats, half-field squats, split squats, and their impact on driving the snatch and clean jerk? For me, this is a good question. I haven't done a lot of variations like these, box squats or half-field squats. But I would say, like, if you have strong legs and it came from doing box squats or it came from doing Hatfield squats or whatever other variation, pin squats, it's going to transfer to some degree. It's unlikely you're going to find somebody who can do like a 300 kilo Hatfield squat, but can't squat 230, 240, as a normal back squat. Box squats, same thing. I mean, maybe less, depending on how you're doing them. If you're doing box squats like West Side where you sit way back, that won't transfer well. But like if you're squatting to a bench or to a box, you're doing mostly the lifts, like traditional sort of squat technique, you're going to be getting some benefit. So I would say like these are not going to directly drive your numbers up like a front squat or back squat, but they're not necessarily that bad. And if you do them well, you'll build strength in your legs and back, and it's going to transfer to some degree. I don't program them very often. Mostly because like you don't have the equipment everywhere, and for the most part, like back squats and front squats are fine and they work well. And so like there's not a need to have to have tons of variety in a program to get more out of people's legs, in my opinion. Chris Murphy, asks, how is computer vision coaching feature coming along? It's slower. We've been focused a lot on some other stuff. It's going to require a lot of data. So we want to make sure we're collecting a bunch of videos and being able to label that. We've definitely made headway on certain parts of it. It's just a matter of, again, like I said before, putting together a feature that's really being useful. It's not just something that exists for the sake of it existing. And I think that we'll get there with that. It just, depending on timing. First goal is obviously getting the logic and the coaching and the program generation to be top notch. Then everything else comes in with that. WM Dennis asks, overheard training. I think he means overhead training. A few weeks back, there was a discussion on snatch overhead squat ratio. I posted up an article. This is from Breaking Muscle, a highly reputable source. Actually, I don't know. I've never really read anything from them, but I'm sure it's fine. Talking about weightlifters don't overhead squat to improve their snatch. I see myself included who say their snatch is held back, overhead stability to strength. What are your thoughts on directly training overhead strength to increase your snatch? So if you can't overhead squat, I mean, everybody can technically overhead squat their max snatch because they did it. But if you can't do overhead squats very well, or you really struggle with stability overhead or positional strength, or just the ability to actually, stay in that position or move around in that position, like if you struggle at all there, doing extra overhead squats is probably not going to hurt you. But I've never seen anyone overhead squat their way to a really big snatch. It just doesn't work that way. The limiting factor is very rarely your ability to hold the weight overhead. They're highly correlated. You have to have a decent overhead squat to do a snatch of any weight, but it's not the kind of thing where you're going to drive the results of one of the snatch with the overhead squat. If you have weaknesses, if you're held back in any way by those things, by shoulder strength or mobility or your ability to hold the weight overhead, then yeah, it's going to make a difference. So I would say get to the prerequisite sort of ability or capability to overhead squat more than you snatch. At least what you snatch comfortably for a few reps, and it's not like some magic numbers or anything, but get to those points and you'll be fine. If you need more than that, then try it out and see, push a little bit more and see if it makes a difference. The thing you should apply to yourself when you're thinking about your program or your training is don't leave any stone unturned. Don't think that oh, someone said don't do power snatches because they're dumb and I don't do them. If you think they'll help, try it and see. There's really no downside to that. You're going to eat up a little bit of time and energy, but it's not going to ruin your lifting career because you tried a few different exercises here and there. I would say for sure, give them a shot and see. And if you think they're a problem, they probably are. If you notice that there is an issue, then yeah, for sure. That being said, I would agree that you're not going to use the overhead squat to actually drive those numbers up unless there's already a major deficiency or some kind of issue there. So that's what I would say as far as that goes. Yeah, I think that's it for the questions. I think that kind of answers everything. I can't think of anything else I would add to that. Just, let's keep this going. We'll do another one next week. I'll probably start throwing in some video form checks for you guys and kind of do a batch of them together. I think that'd be good for you guys to see that. So if you feel, cool, if you feel like you want to do that, then post it up. We'll probably start adding that either next week or the week after. But yeah, ultimately we want to keep these going. So if you guys have more questions, then throw them in there and I'll be in the Discord on a regular basis now so we can get more coaching done, more access to me if you guys have specific questions. Now let's just keep it going. Let's make this community awesome again. All right. See ya. Have a good week and Happy New Year's.